All right, let's dive into something kind of different today, huh? We're tackling this thing called the Law of Jante.
Yeah, the law of Jante.
And we've got this excerpt from a Korean text, of all things.
Interesting source, right?
Yeah, and it's all about how this Jante law, this set of ideas, connects to, like, happiness.
Specifically in Scandinavia, those famously happy Nordic countries.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we're going to break it down. We'll look at all 10 of these Jante tenets, see where they come from, and then, like, the big question.
The big question is, can rules that seem to, well, discourage ambition actually make people happier?
Yeah. Individually, even as a whole society. Wild,
It
right?
really makes you think. I mean, think about the UN's World Happiness Report.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that.
Every year, they rank countries based on well-being. Things like social support, freedom, generosity.
Being how much corruption people perceive. Right?
Yeah.
Trying to get the full picture.
Exactly. And consistently, right there at the top.
Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the Scandinavian trifecta.
Always up there. And these are countries that, well, let's be honest.
Not exactly known for being, like, super expressive or anything.
But they're consistently rated as some of the happiest places on Earth.
It's true. And this excerpt is suggesting that maybe, just maybe, Jante law has something to do with it.
It's a fascinating possibility.
Okay, but before we get into all the details, I gotta ask.
Shoot.
When you hear about a law that basically says, don't think you're special, does that sound like a path to happiness?
That's the paradox, isn't it? Some people hear that and think, ugh, that sounds stifling.
Right, like where's the room for individual ambition?
Yeah, exactly. But others might see it as a way to escape the constant pressure to achieve, to be better than everyone else.
Huh, I hadn't thought of it that way.
It's all about perspective. But to really understand it, we need to look at where it comes from. Jante law actually originates from a novel.
A novel, really?
Yep, back in 1933. A Danish-Norwegian author, Axel Sandemos, wrote A Fugitive Crosses His Tracks. He created this fictional town called Jante.
Jante, okay.
And he used these 10 tenets, what we now call Jante law, to satirize, poke fun at the social pressures of small-town life.
Ah, so it was meant to be like a commentary on those small communities where everyone knows everyone else's business.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even though it started as satire,
It really struck a chord.
yeah, this excerpt points out that it resonated so deeply with people in Scandinavian cultures that it became, well, almost like an unspoken social code.
Wow. So even though it was fiction, it kind of became reality.
In a way, yeah, and it's been passed down through generations. It even influences how kids are raised and educated in those countries.
So we're talking about a set of, like, deeply ingrained social norms.
Think of it as a set of guidelines for navigating social dynamics and expectations.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's get to the good stuff. What exactly are these 10 tenets of Jante law?
All right, tenet number 1, brace yourself. You are not to think you are anything special.
Wow, straight to the point, huh?
No sugarcoating there. And it sets the tone for everything that follows. It's like a direct challenge to that me-first mentality we see so much of these days.
Okay, so humility from the get-go. What's next?
Number 2, you are not to think you are as good as us.
As good as us. So right away, there's this emphasis on, like, equality, not setting yourself above others.
You got it. And it keeps going in that vein. Tenet number 3, you are not to think you are smarter than us.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little self-conscious here. No room for, like, bragging rights under Jante law, it seems.
Nope, not really. And tenet number 4 reinforces that. You are not to convince yourself that you are better than us.
Better than us. I'm noticing a pattern here. Each tenet kind of builds on the previous one, creating this overall message of humility, of shared identity.
Exactly. And number 5 keeps that momentum going. You are not to think you know more than us.
So no acting like a know-it-all, huh?
Not exactly. Jante law emphasizes the value of everyone's knowledge and experiences.
Okay, getting it. What about number 6?
You are not to think you are more important than us.
More important than us. This one really highlights the communal aspect, right? It's like a constant reminder that we're all interconnected, part of something bigger.
You're picking up on the key themes here. Now get ready, because number 7 is where things get a little interesting.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
You are not to think you are good at anything.
Ooh. Wait, what? Does that mean you're not supposed to, like, strive for excellence? To develop your skills?
It's not about discouraging people from pursuing their passions or developing skills. It's more about, well, shifting the focus from external validation to intrinsic motivation.
Huh. So instead of seeking praise or recognition for being good at something, it's more about finding the joy in the process itself.
Precisely. Jante Law encourages you to find fulfillment in the doing, not just the achieving.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp the philosophy here. It's definitely a different way of looking at things. So what's next on this list of humbling guidelines?
Tenet number 8 is a bit more straightforward. You are not to laugh at us.
All right, that one seems pretty self-explanatory. It's about basic respect and kindness.
Right. Even in humor, there's this understanding that you don't belittle others or make them feel inferior.
Got it. And then we have number 9. This one's a bit more, well, I don't know, thought-provoking, maybe.
On.
It says, you are not to think anyone cares about you. Okay, that one feels a little harsh at first glance.
It definitely challenges our inherent need for, well, external validation.
But maybe it's also about encouraging self-reliance, like don't expect others to constantly cater to your needs.
That's an interesting interpretation, and it does tie into Jante Law's emphasis on personal responsibility.
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
And finally, we reach tenet number 10. You are not to think you can teach us anything.
The final rule.
So no unsolicited advice or acting like you have all the answers.
It encourages humility and a willingness to learn from others.
That's actually quite profound when you think about it. We've only just scratched the surface here.
We have.
But my mind is already buzzing. These tenets are, well, they're something else.
They really make you think.
Yeah. I can see how some people might find them restrictive.
Oh, absolutely.
But others might find them, I don't know, surprisingly liberating. Like a way to escape the pressure cooker of constant competition and comparison.
It's a complex cultural concept, that's for sure, with potential benefits and drawbacks. And that's what makes it so fascinating to explore.
Absolutely. We've laid out these 10 tenets.
The foundation of Jante Law.
Yeah. But now, the real challenge.
Figuring out what it all means.
Understanding how these seemingly restrictive rules could actually contribute to the happiness we see in those Scandinavian societies. That's the puzzle we're going to try to piece together.
It's really something, isn't it? How this Jante Law, which seems to be all about, not standing out, could actually lead to greater happiness.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep coming back to. This excerpt even calls it the Scandinavian happiness paradox.
A paradox indeed.
Because if you think about it, the classic American dream narrative, that's all about individual ambition, striving for success, climbing that ladder, that whole winner-takes-all kind of vibe.
Right. The individualistic pursuit of happiness.
Exactly. But then you look at these Scandinavian countries, and their approach, at least on the surface, seems way more, I don't know, restrained.
Less focused on outward displays of achievement.
Yeah. And yet, they consistently rank higher in all those happiness surveys. So how do we make sense of that? It's like, what are they doing differently?
Well, this excerpt highlights a really important concept. It's called the comparison trap.
Oh, the comparison trap. I've definitely fallen into that one.
It's a pretty common experience, unfortunately. Psychologists have found that, constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Whether it's their possessions, their achievements.
Even their perceived happiness. Right. It can be a recipe for unhappiness.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like every time I scroll through social media, I'm bombarded with everyone's highlight reel. Vacations, promotions, perfectly filtered selfies.
Exactly. And it's easy to start feeling like you're not measuring up, like you're somehow falling behind.
Ugh, it's the worst. And it's everywhere, not just on social media, at work, in our families, even among friends sometimes.
And that's where Jante Law comes in. By discouraging self-promotion, that constant need to show off or prove you're better than others, it might actually help to reduce those feelings of envy and inadequacy.
No, it's not about suppressing ambition entirely.
No, not at all.
But maybe more about shifting the focus from outdoing others to achieving personal growth and contributing to something larger than yourself.
You've hit the nail on the head. And when we look at those Scandinavian societies, we can see how this plays out in real life. They have these incredibly flat organizational structures.
Yeah. Even in the workplace, there's less emphasis on rigid hierarchies.
More focus on collaboration, teamwork.
And wasn't it Norway that implemented that super transparent tax law where everyone's tax returns are public knowledge?
Yeah, and that takes a huge amount of trust in your fellow citizens, this sense that people aren't trying to get ahead at the expense of others.
Right. It's like they genuinely believe that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Precisely. And that kind of social trust, that sense of shared purpose, it contributes to overall well-being.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Always good to challenge our assumptions.
Doesn't this emphasis on, not standing out on conformity, potentially stifle creativity, or discourage people from, I don't know, really pushing the boundaries of what they can achieve.
It's a valid concern. And critics of Jante Law often point to that potential downside, that it might lead to a culture of mediocrity, where people are afraid to take risks or fully embrace their unique talents.
Yeah, yeah. Like what about those, those groundbreaking artists, the entrepreneurs who like disrupt industries? Would they feel stifled in a Jante Law society?
That's a great point, and it highlights the importance of balance. Any societal norm, no matter how well-intentioned, can have its limitations. And Jante Law, taken to an extreme, could definitely discourage the kind of innovation and risk-taking that often drives progress. But it's about finding that sweet spot, isn't it?
Finding that balance between individual expression and the well-being of the collective.
Exactly. So maybe it's not about blindly adopting every single tenet of Jante Law,
Right.
but rather about, taking a step back
Mm.
and extracting the wisdom behind it. Are there ways we can learn from this concept and apply it in a way that promotes both individual fulfillment and social harmony?
That's the big question, isn't it? What's fascinating is that even though Jante Law comes from this very specific cultural context, the core ideas it addresses, they're universal. That comparison trap, the pressure to achieve, the constant struggle to balance our own ambitions with, wanting to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. Those are human experiences no matter where you live in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a tiny village or a massive city, you're going to encounter those pressures. So even if we don't all become like Jante Law devotees,
Right.
maybe there's some nuggets of wisdom we can glean from this whole concept.
I think so. It's about prompting that self-reflection, asking ourselves how much of my happiness is tied to external validation. Am I caught in that comparison trap? How can I contribute to my community in a way that feels meaningful?
Yeah, I love it. It's like Jante Law is holding up a mirror, forcing us to examine our own values and motivations, to really think about what truly matters when it comes to living a fulfilling life.
And maybe, just maybe, if we embrace a little bit of that Jante Law humility,
And that focus on community,
we can create a world where success isn't a zero-sum game.
it's a shared journey towards well-being
Yeah.
for everyone. I like that. I really like that. Man, this whole deep dive, it's been like a real mind bender.
It has been quite the journey.
We started with this like kind of obscure cultural concept, this law of Jante. And now we're like grappling with these big universal questions about human nature.
It's amazing how these things connect, isn't it?
Totally. That drive to achieve, to find our place in the world, the desire for connection, for meaning, and of course that age-old quest for happiness.
And what's striking is how Jante Law, despite being so deeply rooted in Scandinavian culture, offers this really unique perspective on those universal struggles. It challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what truly leads to a fulfilling life.
Yeah, like what if, instead of constantly trying to be better than everyone else, what if real contentment comes from like embracing our shared humanity and finding ways to contribute to something larger than ourselves?
It's a radical idea, isn't it?
You get it?
But a powerful one.
It really is.
Mm.
I'm not saying we all need to, pack our bags and move to Denmark or start reciting those 10 tenets every morning.
Right, it's not about blind adherence.
But I do think there are some incredibly valuable lessons we can take away from this whole Jante Law exploration.
Absolutely. Cultivating that awareness of the comparison trap, recognizing when we're getting caught up in that need to self-promote, and remembering that true happiness, it often comes from connection, from contribution.
And hey, maybe, just maybe, if we can all embrace a little bit of that Jante Law humility,
That focus on community well-being.
we might just create a world where success isn't about winning at someone else's expense.
Where it's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly. But rather, a shared journey towards well-being for everyone.
A world where we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down.
Man, that's a thought-provoking way to wrap up this deep dive.
It certainly has given us all a lot to think about.
So, to our amazing listeners out there, what really resonated with you during this exploration of Jante Law? And how might you, incorporate some of these ideas into your own life, your own pursuit of happiness,
Keep those minds curious.
and those conversations going? And as always, happy deep diving.